Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this webinar on agribusiness in Uzbekistan. We are delighted to have a phenomenal panel of speakers to unpack what's happening in the agribusiness sector from an investment standpoint and from a trade standpoint. My name is Esfandiar Batmangelic. I'm the founder of Eurasian Investor, and this is the second webinar in a series that's being organized by Eurasian Investor and Adam Smith Conferences looking at the economy in Uzbekistan. I will shortly be turning it over to Ambassador Rustamov and Ambassador Torlot to introduce and welcome you all to this webinar. To begin, I'll share a few details about how the event will basically proceed. We will be starting with presentations from Simon Glancy about the general investment environment and some of the developments in the space. We will then be moving to a presentation by Igor Kolesnikov of BAT, who will describe the investment project that his company has made in fruit production in Uzbekistan. Wais Khais of AKS will describe how his company has successfully begun the export of Uzbek fruit to the European market. Mr. Beksad Mamatkulov, chairman of BMB, will present on the ways in which his company has tried to scale up the export potential of the Uzbek agricultural sector. And Husan Haidarov of GDF will be describing the kinds of technological changes in processing and production that have made it possible for Uzbekistan to start to target export markets. But without further ado, allow me to turn it to Ambassador Rustamov. I will say as a final note that it's excellent to see 75 participants on this call, a fantastic number for a focused discussion on agribusiness. When you have questions, please use the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen to ask your questions. I will be monitoring that section and I will be able to pass your questions along to the speakers to have them answered. So thank you again for joining us. Ambassador Rustamov, I turn it to you for some welcoming comments.
Thank you very much. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Allow me to welcome in this virtual conference room distinguished speakers, my counterpart Tim Torlot, UK Ambassador to Uzbekistan, and all participants who joined today's event. And of course, special thanks to Esfandiar and his Eurasian Investor for hosting and moderating this roundtable. In my short remarks, I would like to very briefly touch on Uzbekistan's strategic vision of development, its agriculture sector, and its possible implications for foreign businesses. Let me start by saying that historically, agriculture in Uzbekistan is one of the most important spheres of economy. From one hand, for years, it has been a major source of employment and incomes for roughly half of the country's population and ensuring food security. From other hand, centuries-old experience of people in cultivating land has transformed the country into one of the world's major producers and exporters of a wide range of products, from cotton and textile to delicious vegetables and fruits. The government of Uzbekistan gives key priority to development of the agriculture sector, seeking to transform it into one of the main strategic drivers of economic growth. This modernization reflects three big processes or trends. The first one is large-scale reforms, including economic liberalization, launched in Uzbekistan since 2017 by the President Mirziyoyev, and thanks to which Uzbekistan has named the country of the year in 2019 by prestigious The Economist magazine. The second, there is an urgent need to address through modernized agri-sectors several challenges such as climate change, water shortages, population growth, and so on. And the third point is that Uzbekistan has real possibilities to become major and reliable supplier of high-quality organic products to global market, contributing to mitigation of the issue of global food security. Consider just these figures. Only agri-food export has potential to rise up to 20 billion by 2030, It's almost 10 times more than in 2018. The same dynamics expected in textile export, which now replaces the export of raw cotton. In 2019, textile export was at 1.6 billion. And in 6 years, or by 2025, it's to reach 8 billion. So almost 5 times. To achieve these ambitious goals, Uzbekistan needs advanced technologies and know-how for intensive agriculture production and reprocessing of agri-products that will meet all international requirements and standards. The legal base for that is already being developed. So the strategy for development of agriculture of Uzbekistan for 2020 to 2030 is adopted on the government level. The same is regarding the concept of development of organic food production. And this fall, the draft of the national law on the cultivation of organic agricultural products is to be introduced. So this is Uzbekistan's strategic approach and vision for the years ahead. And this is a direction where it is going to. And it opens wide opportunities for cooperation with foreign businesses. First, this is the issue of exporting tasty, delicious, and healthy fruits and vegetables. The second, what I think more important, Uzbekistan opens huge opportunities for foreign companies to make business, to bring new technologies, to establish modern manufacturers of ready, value-added, ecologically clean products and export them. The government of Uzbekistan is very much interested in that form of cooperation and create all conditions for foreign companies that, in terms of creating favorable business climate, guaranteeing protection of investments, and so on and so on. And I take this opportunity to urge our partners in the UK and other countries to use these unique opportunities in Uzbekistan. So the embassy in London is ready to assist every company in establishing mutually beneficial and long-term partnership with Uzbekistan. Thank you very much. I appreciate for your attention.
Thank you, Ambassador. You mentioned the 2020-2030 strategy. I know that Simon has been reviewing that in depth, and so we'll hear a little bit more about what the actual targets are. But allow me to turn it to Ambassador Torlot in Tashkent to give sort of the UK perspective on the potential for particularly British-Uzbek partnership in the agribusiness space. Ambassador. Ambassador, apologies. You may need to unmute yourself. There you are.
That was a test for lip readers. I'm sorry about that. Well, first of all, a very warm welcome to all participants in this. My congratulations to Eurasian Investor, to the Adam Smith conferences, and especially to the Uzbek Embassy in London, who've been fundamentally important in driving forward this event. And I'd also like to introduce Rekhona Khashimova, whom many of you may already know, who's the head of my commercial team here, who knows far more about Uzbekistan and far more about agriculture in Uzbekistan than I ever will do. And she'll be taking part in this event all the way through, so I'll rely on her when we come to questions and answers as well. Rekhona the ambassador's been talking about the Uzbek government's approach to this and the strategy, and Rekhona would be very happy to share with you the strategy for 2020-2030, which the ambassador refers to. This is an absolutely crucial sector for the Uzbekistan economy, as Said Rustamov mentioned, in terms of employment, in terms of the number of people that it employs, the percentage of GDP that it occupies, its importance for export revenues, and its potential for growth. And not least because the quality of the produce can be really excellent here. Particularly in soft fruits, in melons, in apricots, in cherries, in peaches, it's some really, really wonderful produce, but many other areas also. Because of its importance, it's a sector which the international community is very involved in. The World Bank, the EU, the UN, especially the Food and Agriculture Organization, but also the Japanese, the Americans, have really extensive technical and broader support projects in the sector, looking at the diversification of produce, looking at organic agriculture, looking at productivity, looking at improving processing and storage, looking at intensive agriculture, modern energy efficient production, and all aspects of agribusiness. So the government is putting a huge amount of effort into it, but the international community is supporting that with really extensive projects. The Asian Development Bank has a $200 million project. The World Bank's is 500 million. So you're looking at really significant amounts of money. And my last point, picking up on what Yar said, I think the UK has extraordinary capability in this area, in our agri-tech engineering industry, in livestock, in genetics, that will be invaluable for the development of sustainable farming in Uzbekistan. We are at the forefront of world science, world technology, and the development of a truly green economy. And all that put together, allied with a long heritage in the design and manufacture of agricultural machinery and food processing, allows us to help to introduce new pioneering technologies in crop and livestock production, allied with strong quality and animal welfare standards. UK agri-tech engineers are at the forefront of the drive to use autonomous technology for crop production. You know all this better than I do, but we are clearly very well placed as a country to support the revolution in agriculture that the government are talking about and want to embrace. We are very happy in the Embassy to help UK businesses who are anxious to develop partnerships, to trade, and to support the development of the sector here. Get in touch with me, get in touch with Rechona, and we will do all we can to help. So that's all, I think. It's key sector. The international community is heavily involved in support of the sector and the development of the sector, and the UK is uniquely well placed to help with that development as well. So I wish you very well with the conference, and I will listen with great interest to the speakers and to the questions afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. I think those, both you and Ambassador Rustamov have given us the broad themes of today's conversation. And when we were discussing with the panelists how to get practical, Simon insisted that we need to look at some of the data coming out of the strategy. And so I'm going to now turn to him, and I will be sharing a presentation that he has prepared to basically highlight what the new strategy for agricultural development in the country means for particularly foreign investors. So Simon, if you could confirm for me that you can see your presentation on your screen.
Yeah, we've got the title slide up, so we're good to go. Okay, good morning. Can I first of all thank the various UK and Uzbek sponsors of this event who are instrumental in making it happen. The Ministry of Foreign Trade and Investment, the Uzbek and British embassies, Eurasian investors, and of course the industry speakers. In my presentation, I want to talk in some detail about foreign investor activity in agribusiness in Uzbekistan, and in particular, the key industry segments attracting investors. and also which countries are already active in the market. I think this will give a good sense of where the market opportunities are. If we go to the first slide, please. Excellent. To set the scene, I want to briefly mention Agribusiness 2030, the government strategy for the long-term development of agribusiness in Uzbekistan from 2020 to 2030, which was approved in October 2019. Agriculture is one of Uzbekistan's key industries, employing 3.7 million people, with an output of valued in the region of 14 billion in 2018. Central to the strategy is shifting from producing commodities to added value food processing, employment creation in the regions, a huge expansion in the volume of exports, and in the number of export markets for Uzbek produce around the world. The detailed strategy is available for you to access in English. In this slide, you will see two of the strategy's key targets. On the left-hand chart, a planned increase in private sector investment from $650 million in 2018 to $2 billion by the end of the decade. It's a phenomenal increase. By way of comparison, donors are providing financing of nearly $3 billion in 2020 in the agribusiness sector in Uzbekistan across multiple projects, fruit processing, livestock, dairy processing, and helping create a more entrepreneurial culture amongst agribusiness enterprises. The chart on the right-hand side shows a massive increase in food exports from 2.3 billion in 2018 to a target of 20 billion by 2030. Uzbekistan is already a key agri-exporter, mainly to neighboring Kazakhstan, which accounts for 44% of exports, and Russia, 19%. So far, no European market, and I'm including the UK in that, features as a leading export destination. Obviously, we hope that will change. Achieving these targets, which are set out in the strategy, needs the involvement of foreign investors to help form joint ventures, set up businesses in Uzbekistan to apply industry know-how and best practice, or to act as financiers and advisors. If we can go to the next slide, please. So, this slide shows which countries are the leading investors in agribusiness in Uzbekistan in 2020. The data comes from Uzbekistan's state investment strategy and is current to January 2020. In the past 6 months, further foreign direct investment projects have been agreed. So this data is only a snapshot, but nonetheless a pretty accurate picture of actual FDI activity happening this year. Total foreign direct investment plan for 2020, this is the picture in January of this year, stood at $696 million. Turning to who is investing in agribusiness in Uzbekistan, China is the clear leader in 2020, investing $135 million, followed by Turkey, which is investing nearly $90 million, and the States with $74 million. The top 5 foreign investor countries combined account for 62% of all foreign direct investment activity in Uzbek agribusiness. China is investing across the board, notably big investments in livestock breeding and meat processing facilities, food ingredients production, and the localized manufacturing of water irrigation equipment. Turkish investor projects are mainly in 2 large-scale greenhouse developments, while the US projects are mainly in beverages, with Coca-Cola and PepsiCo substantially expanding their production facilities. The UK's biggest agri-investor is BAT, and Igor Kolesnikov, as General Director, will discuss that project later in the webinar. If we can go to the next slide, please. Here we have a review of the largest agribusiness investor deals at the start of the year. This covers all investors from across the world. The largest of these involves B&B Group with a US partner. Obviously, B&B will no doubt discuss the details of that in their presentation in the webinar. You'll see that the 2 largest projects involving foreign direct investors are agro-clusters, and these are integrated facilities which involve the growing, processing, and logistics of agricultural products. If we move on to the next slide, please. Here we have a summary of UK agribusiness deals concluded in 2020. Now this is current to the beginning of the year. It could have changed slightly. What you'll see is that most of the UK deals are pretty small in terms of the value of the investments. The biggest is BET, which is in a fruit processing facility in Samarkand. We also have other investments in logistics and milling and in the construction of dairy and of a dairy processing facility in the Bukhara region and also in animal feed. If we move on to the next slide, please. This slide, in brief, just gives you some idea of which regions are attracting the lion's share of foreign direct investment in Uzbekistan across all of its 14 regions. Top 4 regions are attracting 53% of all foreign direct investment in agribusiness. These are the Bukhara region, Jizak, Sirdarya, and the Tashkent region. So it's sort of quite interesting that these regions are sort of leading the way in terms of where foreign direct investors are seeking to get established. If we move on to the next slide, please. This slide gives you an overview of, okay, what are foreign direct investors actually investing in? And what we can see is that the biggest deals and the biggest activity is around integrated agri-cluster projects, which combine the processing, production, and logistics. So we see that although there's only been 3 agri-cluster investments this year, the value of these at nearly $81 million leads agribusiness FDI if you look at it in terms of value. Investments in greenhouses, mainly to grow vegetables all year round and destined for export markets like Russia and China, also feature prominently, as do fruit and vegetable processing facilities for both export and domestic consumption. And lastly, meat processing facilities also feature, aimed at reducing imports currently from Russia and Kazakhstan. So we've got a mixture of some of the investments are driven by trying to substitute imports, while others are very much focused on building Uzbekistan's export capabilities. If we go to the next slide, please. This is just to give you a sense of what are some of the segments of agribusiness that perhaps are only getting started with foreign direct investors and, in our view, have got a lot of upside potential. The 2 that I would pick from this list are, first of all, biofuels. There's only one foreign direct investment project in that particular segment. I think that's going to be one that has got a lot of upside because there will be a lot of opportunities to utilize production waste and food waste and to convert that into fuel. Another one is packaging. As we see, for example, the emergence of more supermarkets in Uzbekistan, and we see innovation in terms of product formats, I think there'll be a lot of demand for both packaging facilities and innovation in packaging in general. If we go to the next slide, please. Just some other thoughts on overlooked opportunities where I think there's opportunities for British business. Firstly, I think there's opportunities for more localized production of high quality animal feed and in localized production of veterinary pharmaceuticals under license. Biofuels, I have mentioned in the previous slide. The other one that I would highlight is expansion in vocational and third-level education programs in agribusiness and agri-science that meet international standards and the needs of the state's Agribusiness 2030 strategy. It is remarkable to us that only 2,180 students graduated in agri-related subjects in third-level institutions in Uzbekistan in 2018. To deliver the transformational industry changes the government is aiming for, I think requires, substantial investments in not just simply university-based educational programs, but also a lot of vocational training programs. If we move to the next slide, please. In this slide, I just wanted to sort of wrap up and highlight the work that's being done by Uzbekistan's Investment Promotion Agency, which is part of the Ministry of Foreign Trade and Investment. Their website gives specific details of agribusiness projects seeking foreign investors, and there's quite a number of them. 134 agribusiness projects across the country are looking for foreign partners. These projects are worth 1.2 billion. I think for British business, one of the good things is that the State Investment Promotion Agency has translated project documentation into English, giving key details about these projects, where they're located, what's involved, which can be found at the link which appears on the slide. That concludes my presentation. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Simon. That was an excellent and detailed presentation, and I can see the questions are already rolling in. So we have 12 questions so far. We will be keeping the last 30-45 minutes of this session for Q&A, so we will get to your questions. Simon, you mentioned that BAT is one of the largest UK investors in the agribusiness space, perhaps an unexpected investor, but now we're going to hear from CEO of BAT Uzbekistan, Igor Kolesnikov, about what sort of took them into the fruit production business and what it has meant for the company. So, Igor, I will turn it to you, and I will also share your slides shortly.
Well, good afternoon, everyone, those who are in Tashkent, and good morning to those who are in London. So for me, it's a great pleasure and great honor to be here with you about quite a unique topic in BAT. As you know, BAT is a tobacco company, and we don't deal with the non-tobacco businesses globally. But I'm very privileged to say that Uzbekistan is only one of two global exceptions where BAT made the decision to enter into non-tobacco business. Yeah, and I'm extremely privileged to be one of two GMs, general managers globally, who are on top of our regular business, dealing on a daily basis with the agribusiness as well. Yeah, so completely new era for us, completely new business, but we're enjoying it very much. Okay, so the company with whom we made the partnership is called Samfruit. Yeah, Samarkand Fruit. It's a well-established company which exists for many years, in Samarkand, but they were always local, and they were always lacking some scale, and they always had a bigger ambition to grow, And I think here, if we can move to the next slide, please. I think this is where we found how we call it a perfect marriage, because British American tobacco can give a huge scale. All of our resources, all of our global network. We know most of the companies worldwide. Not only tobacco, but all other companies. Of course. But very often we don't have local expertise. And Samfruit is the company with fantastic day-to-day local expertise. But they want to grow, and they want to grow faster, and they need the global presence. So this is where we found a perfect marriage. Why we made this decision? First of all, it's perfectly in line with the government intention. So each time we speak to the government, again, we've been here for the last 25 years. And we went through very good days and very bad days. But we always partnered with the Uzbek government. Despite all the challenges our business faced in Uzbekistan. And I think it was more just the appreciation of a long partnership with the government, and fully understanding the priorities of Uzbek government, the substitution of imports, increase exports, providing local jobs, etc. So this was also a very nice contribution from BAT into success of the recent reforms conducted by the Uzbek government. But of course, it's very attractive financial business. Otherwise, we would have never done this. So it's 100% export. It's exactly what the Uzbek government wants, and it's also very good for us. As BAT. Of course, good margins. But the biggest advantage is that this company wants to grow further. and we want to develop this company further. Yeah, that's why we decided to marry together. Yeah, and last but not least, yeah, BET is a company which would never invest a penny into some too risky business, yeah, without clearly knowing whom we're dealing with, yeah, because we are very concerned about our image, about our reputation, and about global limitations we are working in. Yeah, so this company has a quite well-established governance. Yeah, they are under international audits, fully transparent management structure. Yeah, ISO certified. So for us, it was also very important that we're dealing with a good company with a good reputation without any foreseen problems. Yeah, hence the decision to invest 11 million has been made by our UKN parents. Yeah, so we acquired 50% of the share. So it's a 50-50 marriage. Yeah. I think, Simon, in your slides there was a slightly bigger number. Yeah, probably it's more kind of addition. So we're open to consider further investment. Yeah, it was a number of 13 million, I think, if I'm not mistaken. Of course, once we go over first stage, yeah, additional at least $2 or more million will be seriously considered. Okay, we're going to the next slide, please. So what is Sunfruit? Yeah, Sunfruit, first of all, is a fantastic company. I love it. My wife loves it. Yeah, so each time I travel to Samarkand, she asks me to bring some plums, yeah, and cherries. Yeah, it's basically the company which grows vegetables, fruits, and herbs. Yeah, they process, they dry them, they pack them, and export. Yeah, so 100% of its products go export. You will never find it in Korzinka or Makro in Uzbekistan so far, but we're looking at potential growth opportunities. Yeah, so it's 30 plus SKUs. Yeah, and they only sell to big multinational companies like Nestle, Unilever, Mars, a lot of other big multinationals, yeah, selling to 10 plus markets, yeah, so EU, CIS, mainly Russia and Japan. From next year, USA will be added on the list. Yeah, and as I mentioned, it's being audited and fully certified, not only for production, but also the laboratory, yeah, so which is also very important for us. So very delicious set of products, yeah, fantastic. Very different to what we sell on a daily basis in BET. So very exciting business for us. Next slide, please. Okay, so where is the money going to be spent for? Yeah, so we divide it in three directions. Yeah, one is machinery. Yeah, so we buy additional conveyor, we buy the freezer dryer. Yeah, so we're going to increase the current capacity by 6 times. Crop, yeah, because we need the high quality crops. Yeah, normally we buy it from Western companies. Yeah, and also facilities. Yeah, so we're building 2 more production sites and the warehouses. Yeah, because we plan to grow, hence we need more capacity. So as a result of the $11 million investment, yeah, the aim is to increase capacity by 6 times, 10 times increase of the export revenues. Yeah, today, as I said, it's a wonderful company, but they lack scale. Yeah, the export revenue is only $3 million a year. Yeah, we aim to multiply it by 10, make it 30 at least. Yeah, employment will grow 2 times. Yeah, and taxes, which is also very important in the current context, will increase by 30 times because the profit will increase and other expansion will come. Okay, we'll go to the next slide, please. And key learnings so far, yeah, because in the beginning it was a bit of unknown territory for us, yeah, uncharted territory, but we're very excited, yeah, not only because it's a new business for us, but because we learn as well as BET. Our partner learns a lot from BET, yeah. Our learning is, as I put, never underestimate local bureaucracy. Local bureaucracy, not only from government side, yeah, but also from BET side, yeah, because We call it internal controls. We don't call it bureaucracy in BET, but in reality, sometimes it turns into bureaucracy. Yeah, so we always want to go faster, but there are so many things which drag us back. Yeah, but we will learn with our partner as we go. Yeah, the interesting setup now is that because we're 50-50 marriage, yeah, so no big decision can be made without a compromise. Yeah, so whatever new decision we take, yeah, we sit with our partner, and there must be compromise. Otherwise, it's a deadlock. Yeah, it's a strange feeling sometimes. Yeah, but it's very nice because you have to reach a conclusion at the end. You have to reach a compromise, yeah, with our partner. So far, so good. We always find the compromise. Yeah, as I said, it's two-way learning. Yeah, because we learn from them because they have a lot of local expertise. They have a lot of technical skills. Yeah, but at the same time, what BET gives to some fruit, yeah, today is a strategy. Yeah, because BET never think about 1 year. Yeah, we always think 10, 20, 50 years ahead. Yeah, and I think this is what some fruit needs. Yeah, if they're ambitious to grow further. Yeah, and of course, as I mentioned, we do have a lot of fun. Yeah, sometimes it's a scary fun. Yeah, but in most of times it's a real fun. It's a good fun. Yeah, and it's a huge learning curve for us. Yeah, so overall, very excited, very happy. Very happy to continue investing in Uzbek economy. Yeah, a very unique decision to start investing money in non-nicotine related projects. And again, Uzbekistan is only one of two exceptions globally for BET, where the group made this decision to allocate money for non-nicotine related projects. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Igor. That was an excellent presentation, and I'm glad that you're having fun with this new, unique line of business for your company. I think one of the things you raised that's really important is this issue of scale, because as Simon mentioned, the target for 2030 for the country is to grow exports to 20 billion. But, we just heard that one of the perhaps largest and most modern of the export companies is currently at around 3 million in export revenue. So it means that there's a huge kind of set of work that needs to be done to scale up the export potential of what I understand to be a lot of mostly smaller producers in the country that need to be sort of connected to a supply chain. So hopefully, actually, this is something that Wais can comment on in his experience in actually facilitating one of these exports. So I will now turn it to you, and I will let me know when you would like me to start showing this.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Asman, for the opportunity. You can show the slides now, so please go ahead. Slide 1, please, number 1. Again, I'm privileged to be part of this important forum and amongst dignified personalities in today's remarkable gathering. And to give you the overview of my recent import experience of fresh produce from Uzbekistan to United Kingdom, where AKS have worked closely with Uzbek government agencies, product value chains and standard departments to pave the way for their produce to be accepted and exported to foreign markets, including Europe. This successful pilot activity was achieved through working closely with farmers, producer groups, processors, packagers, and other elements of value chain across the country. The government of Uzbekistan was far more supportive, and AKS was actively involved in discussion with representatives of ministries and departments in preparation of necessary documentation, conducting sanitary and photosanitary analysis necessary for importing products into the UK market. Now, we all understand that improving agriculture is an essential step to boost the economy, and largely this is to the current informal sector activity. Accordingly, development of the agriculture sector is a central pillar of the government of Uzbekistan's strategy for economic growth and poverty reduction. Now, Uzbekistan has changed to a reform-oriented government with full political will, and it is moving the sector from a single crop-oriented and centralized strategy to a more proactive market approach. Now, during my visits, talking to the farmers, it was easy to see how various varieties of fruit, for example, cherries, pomegranates, could easily meet the changing demand of UK market. The main issue was to ensure a relatively unknown supplier such as Uzbekistan could meet governmental guidelines on being cultivated in an eco-sensitive way without chemicals and pest-free. Now, the UK is a promising market for Uzbek fruit and vegetables. At the same time, the British authorities very carefully select products imported into the country, as they believe that product must be environmentally friendly, free from quarantine contamination, with the least use of chemicals. Uzbek production capacity can, theoretically, provide greater volumes for export. However, producers face a number of issues, including variability of production and quality, logistic cost, and market access. Slide 2, please. Thank you. As an established service provider company registered in the UK, and based on the experience of our technical team, what I will aim to do here today is to pinpoint those areas that present challenges on export of fresh produce from Uzbekistan. This is based on our various visits to meet the producers in Uzbekistan and also dealing directly with the British authorities there. Now, the challenges and our findings were, in some areas, the producers still need a consistent supply of inputs and the training on how to use resources in terms of best practice. The post-harvest handling and processing with rigorous quality control mechanisms to be adopted with more coherent regulations and certification process. The sector is learning very quickly. This is how to adopt with the help of the government. But ultimately, the government should be playing an oversight role and need to bring in the still quiet and newly emerged private sector to take on some of these roles, as AKS have already supported this. Being a landlocked country, improved transportation and logistics plays an important role in increase of export of agricultural produce. The establishment of transit routes, example Afghanistan and Pakistan, the Chabahar port via Iran to Middle East is important and essential. Currently, the government has taken action on providing the subsidies towards the cost of air transport, but it still needs to look at the sustainable model during the harvest and non-harvest time. Another part of the product value chain that needs to be looked at is value addition activities such as pulping, juicing, drying, including the marketing, branding, and packaging, which we mentioned. And from my own experience of importing high quality cherries, there is a demand, but currently export volumes are too small to cater to large buyers. Another area to look at is the business support services. Providing market information is improving, but it needs to be more sensitive to given products in emerging demands, to become less opportunistic and more systematic. Export finance, export credits, subsidies, fiscal issues are gradually aligning themselves, but it is a work in progress. Building market access through WTO accession and trade agreements within both the region and wider markets are important. Free trade zones and similar exports incentives are given, but again, this has to be carefully considered in terms of both market restoration and WTO accession implications. Sorry. Strengthen the newly formed export promotion agencies, the institutional development element, the capacity building needs to be looked at as well. Promoting inward investment to bring financial capitals and technical knowledge to improve the supply chain is also very important. Most of all, market diversification. The market diversification is already underway. Uzbekistan has identified East and Western Europe, and specifically the UK, as a potential export destination. And we understand some fresh produce are making its way to Europe, Korea and Japan, but volumes are still very small. This will reduce dependency on more traditional markets such as Russia and China, and force Uzbek producers to increase in product quality and standards compliance where EU standards are now seen as a benchmark. If Uzbekistan can demonstrate compliance, it will ease access to other markets, example the Gulf and the rest. Another opportunity is to move into certifiable organic products, which we mentioned, which I believe it will sell at higher unit cost. A final point that I'm personally trying to follow up is regional cooperation with neighboring countries, example Afghanistan. Now, we all know both countries have surplus production and can jointly seek new markets. Both need value addition support, perhaps through the creation of agro-industrial zones on the border, where resources could be consolidated. Taking a step back and looking at the wider issues, a stronger export performance brings wider benefits to the Uzbekistan and regional political economy. Export orientation can also bring potential challenges, and some of the issues that would need analysis is wider government policy, how export-led development will sit within overall government strategy, fiscal issues, understanding how other policies and incentives will affect export development, regional dimension, including how stronger regional trade and investment linkages might contribute to stabilization, political economy, moving from relatively protected domestic markets to export markets can be challenging, but how will the government manage any political, economic, and social fallouts out of this? Environmental issues, very importantly, including water usage and electricity. So these are important points. And if you allow me to conclude by saying that your investment in Uzbekistan plays an important role in the long-term development of this country. We all know this is an exciting time for everyone. New technologies and markets present farming with exceptional opportunities to grow. But these will come to nothing if we don't continue to tackle threats to our planet and animal health. It's crucial that the government and industry work together to capitalize on these opportunities. And myself, I will really look forward working in this amazing country and supporting the agricultural sector there. Thanks very much, Asfan.
Thank you, Ais. That was an excellent presentation. And I think particularly it was important that you highlighted the social aspect of particularly the agriculture sector as a major employer in the country, and this idea that there are big goals that can be achieved in the areas of poverty reduction, and then also the important consideration for the sustainability, environmental sustainability of production, both things that we need to consider. I will now turn it to Mr. Behzad Mamatkulov, who is the chairman of BMB Trade, which, as Simon mentioned, is one of the largest export companies active in exports in Uzbekistan. And Mr. Mamatkulov will be addressing us in Russian, and his colleague will be providing a simultaneous translation. And I will also now share the screen. So please just let me know when you would like me to move to the next slide. I turn it to you. Thank you.
Assalomu alaykum, hurmatli webinar ishtirokchilari.
Very well. Greetings, dear webinar participants.
Avvalambor mazkur webinar ishtirokga taklif qilgani uchun Eurasian sarmoyadori kompaniyasi rahbari janob Spandior Batmangevichga o'z minnatdorchiligimni bildiraman. Shuningdek, mamlakatimizda O'zbekiston Respublikasini Buyuk Britaniyadagi elchisi janob Said Rustamovga hamda Buyuk Britaniyaning O'zbekiston Toshkentdagi elchisi janob elchixonasiga o'zimni samimiy minnatdorchiligimni bildiraman.
First of all, allow me to express my gratitude to the head of the Eurasian Investor company, Mr. Spandiar Batman Gelija, for the invitation to participate in such an interesting webinar. Also, allow me to thank the Ministry of Investment and Foreign Trade, Uzbekistan, the Embassy of the United Kingdom in Tashkent, and the Embassy of Uzbekistan in London.
Qadrli do'stlar, avvalambor men Buyuk Britaniyaning yetakchi kompaniyalar bilan aloqada bo'lib turganidan bag'oyat minnatdorman. Umuman ayniqsa ular orasida mamlakatimizda investitsiya qilishni xohlagan, O'zbekistonda ishlash ishtiyoqini bildirayotgan kompaniyalarga o'zimni samimiy minnatdorchiligimni bildiraman.
Dear friends, I'm very happy to have the opportunity to be in communication with the leading UK companies, especially those who are seeing themselves as the potential investors in Uzbekistan. I'm very grateful for this opportunity.
Ma'lumki, umuman bugungi kunda O'zbekiston o'sha nafaqat agrar davlat, umuman iqtisodiyoti har taraflama rivojlangan sanoat o'sha agrar industriya davlati hisoblanadi.
It is well known that Uzbekistan is no longer just an agricultural country, but there are significant efforts made to develop other industries, making it an agro-industrial country.
Xususan muhtaram yurtboshim Shavkat Mirziyoyevni hokimiyat tepasiga kelganlaridan keyin oxirgi 3 yilda umuman qishloq xo'jaligi sohasi batamom o'zgacha ruhda tashkil qilinyapti. Agar ahamiyat beradigan bo'lsak, umuman davlat buyurtmalarini, masalan, g'allaga bo'lgan, paxtama bo'lgan g'alla buyurtmalarini bekor qilinib, aynan o'sha bevosita shu erkinlik berilishini o'zi ham bu menimcha o'ylaymanki juda ham katta islohotlardan biri hisoblanadi.
Specifically, major changes have taken place after Mr. Shavkat Mirziyoyev has become the president of Uzbekistan. And in fact, the agricultural sector of Uzbekistan has seen drastic changes. If we consider alone the change of policy in state orders for grain and cotton and moving from the single crop culture, that in itself makes a huge change.
Ahamiyat bersak, shu oxirgi paytda aynan qishloq xo'jaligiga zamonaviy texnologiyalar, zamonaviy industriyalar kirib kelyapti. Ayniqsa o'sha tomchilatib sug'orish bo'ladimi, o'sha bugungi kunda teplishniy issiq komplekslar va butun o'sha dunyodagi eng rivojlangan zamonaviy industriya tizimi mamlakatimiz iqtisodiyotiga, undan qishloq xo'jaligi sohasiga kirib kelyapti.
Especially we are witnessing that the modern technologies are entering
I think we may have lost them. Does anyone else have the audio for the team from BNB? Hello.
Hello.
Okay. I think we can hear you again.
Yeah.
Okay, please.
So, I was saying that the economy of recent years in the agribusiness, as such, we can mention the sophisticated drip irrigation systems and hothouse complexes.
Mr. Mamatkulov, unfortunately, the audio is not very good. Gentlemen, unfortunately, the audio quality is, it's a little bit better. The audio quality is not very good. Perhaps what we can do is...
Can I suggest,
if you,
sorry, Aspen, can I
please
suggest if they can go out of a picture, just audio,
yes.
and then, yeah.
Yeah, let's try that. If you could turn off your video.
Turn off your camera.
It may make the connection a little bit stronger. Let's try for another 1 minute. Hopefully the audio will improve. But if not, in the interest in time, I would then ask that we save the sort of participation for the Q&A, if that's all right. So hopefully you have turned off, I see the camera. Can you test the audio now?
Can you hear us now? Is it better?
It's a little bit better. Maybe it would be good if you want to sort of summarize the final, maybe 3 points. That might be the best way to proceed, and we can come back to you for the Q&A.
Kompaniya tizimiga ahamiyat beradigan bo'lsak, kompaniya investitsion konsalting kompaniya hisoblanadi. 2017-yilda tashkil qilingan. Bugungi kunda kompaniyaning tizimida 4 ta korxona, o'sha 4 ta dachерный предприятие faoliyati bevosita faoliyat ko'rsatyapti. O'tgan davr mobaynida qariyb $500 million qiymatdan yuqori bo'lgan investitsion loyihalarni bugungi kunda mamlakatimizda amalga oshiryapmiz.
I just would like to summarize by saying that our company has been established in 2017. We specialize in investment and consulting, and we've done 4 major projects for a total worth of 500 million.
Xususan mana janob Simon Kellinsi bo'yicha ta'kidlab o'tdilarki, bugungi kunda o'sha Amerikaning Silverleaf International kompaniyasi bilan $344 million qiymatga ega bo'lgan o'sha zamonaviy agro o'sha klaster tizimini tashkil qilyapmiz Jizzax viloyatida.
And as Mr. Gellinsi mentioned earlier, with the American Silverleaf company, we're establishing a major agro cluster in Jizzax. In a project for a total amount of 344 million.
Xususan bu undan tashqari bugungi kunda o'sha Rossiyaning mashhur Nationalniy rezervni kompaniyasi bilan $57 million qiymatga ega bo'lgan zamonaviy agrologistik kompleks, ya'ni mahsulotlarni o'sha yetishtirishdan to o'rab, upakovka qilib, o'sha zamonaviy standartni holga keltirguncha bitta uzviy kompleksni tashkil qilyapmiz.
Besides that, another major project for us is that cooperation with the Russian-based company Nationalniy Reserve for a total of 57 million, where we're establishing an agricultural and logistical complex which has a full vertical integration.
Xitoyda Bayti Group kompaniyasi bilan bevosita qiymati $50 million qiymatga ega bo'lgan choyni rivojlantirish markazi faoliyatini yo'lga qo'yganmiz. Demak, O'zbekiston tarixida birinchi marta choyni yetishtirib, bugungi kunda o'sha upakovka qilib ichki bozorda bevosita o'sha xalqimizga yetkazib beryapmiz.
Besides that, another major project is a cooperation with the Chinese Bayti company, which allows us to grow tea in Uzbekistan and ensure the final product.
Oxirgi paytda o'sha mamlakatimizning xorijdagi elchixonalari bilan umuman tashqi ishlar vazirligi juda ham uzviy hamkorlikda ishlayapmiz. Ana shularning bir natijasi sifatida Italiya kompaniyasi bilan bevosita 25 million yevro qiymatga ega shartnoma tuzganmiz. Bugungi kunda qo'shma korxona ochdik Jizzax viloyati Baxmal tumanida. Mana avgust oyida Baxmal tumanida 400 gektarga o'sha zafaron urug'larini, zafaron piyoz boshlarini yetishtirib, o'sha aynan zafaronni o'sha yerda yetishtirib qayta ishlash va конечно produksiyasini Italiyaga eksport qilishda, umuman Yevropa bozoriga eksport qilishda rejalashtirganmiz.
We have also intensified our cooperation with our foreign embassies, and as such, we are cooperating with the Italian-based Opera company. Jointly, we're investing in Jizak region. We're on 400 hectares. We are growing saffron for further exports.
Buni hozirgi loyihamizni yakuni bo'yicha biz demak avgust oyini rejamizga ko'ra mamlakat dunyodagi ikkinchi zafaron yetishtiruvchi plantatsiyaga aylanamiz. O'zbekiston umuman dunyo bozorida ikkinchi zafaron yetishtiruvchi plantatsiyaga aylanamiz. Shuningdek, mazkur loyiha doirasida Italiyaning zamonaviy современный laboratoriyalarini hammasini o'rnatib, bevosita shu yetishtirilgan mahsulotlarimizni shu o'zida Baxmal tumanining o'zida laboratoriyani o'tkazib, Yevropa bozoriga o'sha Yevropa standartlariga asoslangan tovarni chiqarib berish rejalashtirilgan.
The successful completion of this project will make us the second largest saffron producer in the world, and besides that, it will allow us to introduce the Italian technologies in Uzbekistan, and will make our final product compliant with the European standards and acceptable for European markets, and it will all be produced in Baxmal district of Jizak region.
Shuningdek, bugungi kunda aynan Yevropa bozoriga qishloq xo'jalik mahsulotlarini eksport qilish yuzasidan juda katta loyiha ishlaganmiz. Joriy yil yanvar oyida Fransiyaning Advantage Center kompaniyasi bilan hamkorlikda o'sha 4 million yevro qiymatga ega bo'lgan proyekt o'sha imzoladik. Ya'ni kompaniya o'zini 2 million yevro mablag'ini nafaqat investitsiya jalb qilyapmiz, balki xorijga ham investitsiya tikyapmiz. 2 million mablag'imizni o'sha Fransiyaga tikib, Fransiyaning o'zida hozir bugungi kunda qo'shma korxona ochdik. Bugungi kunda hamkorimiz tomonidan o'sha jihozlarda, obорудованияларni qo'yish ishlari yakunlanyapti. Joriy yilda o'sha endi pandemiya nuqtai nazaridan ozgina loyihamiz chekindi, lekin sentyabr oyiga borib birinchi o'zbek o'sha mahsulotlari biz Fransiyaga eksport qilishni rejalashtirganmiz.
And one more major project I need to mention is that our cooperation with the France-based Advantage company. We have a 4 million euro worth deal with them. We have started cooperation with them in January. Due to pandemic, some of our efforts have been paused. However, this is an effort where we are not only bringing investment to Uzbekistan, but also 2 million of investment is going to France, where we will be establishing our sales center for our produced through this project.
Mr. Mamatkulov, if I may, my apologies. In the interest of time, I'd like to move on so that we can save time for the question and answer session, because I see a number of questions that would be relevant for you to answer. Allow me to mention for all of the audience, we will be making the presentations available, and that also companies will be providing more detailed presentations. So we have a more detailed presentation for BMB. So with my apologies, Mr. Mamatkulov, thank you for addressing us in Uzbek, not Russian, a more beautiful language, I would say. Allow me to move to Mr. Husan Haydarov of GDF for the final presentation. Husan, I would ask you to try and do this in 5 minutes so we can leave some time for questions.
Yeah, I will do my best.
Okay, great. And I'll also mention, I will, because I see that there are 23 questions that have been asked, and we want to try and get to many of them as possible. We will run over by 10 minutes for this meeting. So if you are able to stay with us for an extra 10 minutes, please do. So Husan, I turn.
Okay. Your audio. Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Husan Haydarov. I am commercial director of GDF company. Thank you very much for Eurasian investors, and especially to Islam Europe for giving us a chance to give information about us. So I briefly give information about our company. Our company works on 3 directions: on fresh exports, and on frozen product export, and on dried fruits export. We have our branches in 3 regions of Uzbekistan. Main region where I'm sitting is Tashkent, and we have gardens and we have orchards in Namangan region, and we have greenhouses and warm houses and open fields, also processing plant in Surkhandarya, and we have a main processing plant which is on the line of frozen products, on the line of drying products, and we have here sorting lines for fresh products. So let's switch to the next one. Next slide. Okay. So as you can see here, Goldright Fruit Export has two production processing factories. First production processing factories is located in Tashkent. Here we have, and the same as this production facility we have in Surkhandarya. So as you see in our processing plants, we have processing of fresh fruits and vegetables, and we have production of frozen fruits and vegetables. We have production of dried vegetables and herbs, and we have cold storages and long time saving storages like pre-cooling equipment here located in our plants. So let's switch to next slide, please. Can you hear me? So I should briefly give the explanation what kind of equipments we are using. Both our plants are using mostly European equipments. So the refrigeration complex, the refrigeration house here, we use modern equipment from Siltec cooling company from Holland, and it allows us to store at a time 10,000 tons of products. Also complex includes freezers for long-term storage or frozen products, pre-cooling chambers, vacuum cooling chambers for quick cooling for salads and greens, and we have hydro-cooling equipment for quick cooling cherries. This is mostly used on before the sorting and calibrating the cherries. We use it hydro-cooling in order to decrease down the internal temperature of cherries. And we have chambers for long-term storage of vegetables separately from fruits. We have long-term storage chambers for fruits. RGS, it's a regulated gas system, it is called. So, and we have Unitec company lines, it's Italian company. We use it for sorting and calibration of our equipment. I'm sorry, sorting and calibration of our fruits and vegetables. So can we switch to the next slide? Can we switch to the next slide? Okay. Frozen fruits and vegetables product line. On the sector of frozen products line, we use the IQF line, which we actually the IQF line we use for freezing, shock freezing the vegetables and fruits such as broccolis, sour cherries, melons, all kind of vegetables and fruits. We can use it, and the capacity of this equipment is 20-25 tons per day. And we have spatial blanching line, cabin plant from Denmark. Also, I should mention that we use IQF from Octafrost, and we use a spatial optical sorting machine from Tomra. Can we switch to the next slide? Okay, we have in two of these plants we have drying lines. We use mostly these drying lines for drying vegetables and herbs. The plant processes fresh agriculture products to produce high quality dried vegetables and herbs. Processing capacity of these two plants is more than 100 tons of raw materials per day. Production is carried out on modern equipment from manufacturers in Germany and Belgium and Turkey and China. So these equipments we also use mostly for bulk packaging. Currently, we are planning to implement and to import new lines for small packaging and to produce more supermarket-friendly products, both from dried vegetables and herbs and frozen products. Currently, what we are exporting is on a bulk packaging. So our plans for the future is new technologies, new equipments from abroad, which concentrates on this small packaging. Also, I should note that our company has ISO certificate, and we have global certificates for production of for growing of fresh fruits in our own orchards, and we have global gap certificates for growing at our greenhouses at Surkhandara region. In conclusion, I would like to say that all the work done above is ultimately aimed not only at maximizing the profit of this agriculture holding, but also to at increasing the export potential of our company, increasing foreign currency earnings, creating infrastructures, and creating new jobs in all areas of our country. So this is shortly about our company, and it's about our plans and about our company directions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Hassan. That was excellent. And I think, what was important about that presentation is that, as we may recall from Simon's presentation, investments in greenhouses and processing equipment have been maybe the key areas of investment to date. And you helped explain how basically this allows you to sell more types of products packaged in the right ways at the right standards for the export markets. So I think that was an excellent way to conclude. In the roughly, let's say, 25 minutes we have left, we have many, many questions to get to. I'm going to start taking questions from the Q&A section and sharing them with the speakers. But I'd like to start with the question to Wais, actually. One of the attendees has asked us to talk a little bit about the kind of globalization or regionalization dynamic. And you touched on this in your presentation when you pointed out that cooperation between countries might be a way to achieve scale. The attendee asked about Uzbekistan and Tajikistan perhaps coming up with a single supply chain or brand for export. You mentioned Afghanistan. Could you comment a little bit on how you see that potential and whether that might be a way to get more scale for export markets?
Absolutely. I mean, what I was trying to, thanks very much for this very important question as well. I think what I was referring to on that was the countries in surrounding, especially Tajikistan and Uzbekistan and Afghanistan, they have surplus of produce. What the surplus can, what can be done is basically by creating those free trade zones or on the borders, they can create facilities where they can work together on either exchanging the products between themselves, or they can actually export it across. Middle East is one of them. I think there's a number of areas that it can, because I visited a farm, a hydroponic farm in Middle East, and I'm just giving you a very quick example of it. so the hydroponic farm was supplying to major super chains stores in Middle East and UAE. That includes Saudi Arabia as well. So that hydroponic farm has some products which could be complemented from products from Uzbekistan, Afghanistan, and Tajikistan. So, and they had already access to super chains, and that's where you create that chain of flow of those products, especially if you have surplus. If the hydroponic farm was they were growing strawberries, you can put cherries next to it from Uzbekistan and then sell it to the supermarkets. So these sort of areas that could be looked at. I hope that I'm answering this question.
I think that made a lot of sense. Thank you, Ais. If I can actually now turn to Simon and to Igor to perhaps comment on a question that's been raised by a couple people, which relates to the strategy that the government has set forth. And Simon, you outlined the targets, and one of the attendees has asked whether or not that this strategy, the 2030 strategy, is it something that can be considered a state-led development model for the agribusiness sector, or when you were dealing with it, did you come to see it as something that established targets but allowed really the private sector to have a clear role? And I sort of addressed this question to Igor as well, because Igor, you mentioned that the unusual move of BAT into the agribusiness space was in some ways aligned with what the Uzbek government wanted to see for, let's say, local development and the importance of that sector. How much, was this something that you as a company sort of led yourselves, and how much was it something that has been sort of a new expectation on the part of sort of the Uzbek government for investors in the agricultural space?
Perhaps you go first. All right.
Sure, Igor, after you then.
Sorry, who's taking Simon? You want to go ahead?
Yeah, what I would say is I think at the moment the sort of strategic direction for agribusiness is very much being driven by the state in Uzbekistan. And the reason for that is that I suppose it's a legacy of the Soviet Union and the first 30 years of independence of Uzbekistan. There is not a lot of major, large agribusiness players in the private sector yet. Most of agribusiness in Uzbekistan, as has been alluded to, is very small scale. Lots and lots of micro enterprises, lots of small scale enterprises. So I think one of the things the strategy would like to do is to create a number of national champions who would be private sector. Now, clearly B&B is one of these. It's got tremendous scale and is expanding abroad and is involved in major projects in Uzbekistan. Likewise, BET, but still, I think a lot of the strategy is going to be driven by the state in terms of strategy, subsidies, grant and assistance. The other comment I'd make is clearly donors are absolutely critical to help make the transformation of agribusiness into being more competitive and compliant with international standards and export oriented by a whole range of subsidies and assistance.
Thank you, Simon.
Okay, yeah, I think I'm next. Well, I mean, to answer the question, yeah, it was purely our decision. Yeah, I mean, BT is a very big company. It's difficult for me to imagine someone can force us to do a multi-million-dollar deal simply against our will. Yeah, of course, it was purely our decision. Yeah, of course, we consulted with the government. Yeah, so we have regular meetings with the government officials. Yeah, so appreciate for their support. Yeah, as I said, for 25 years, we always partnered with the Uzbek government, and we really appreciate this continuous partnership with them. Of course, we consulted, yeah, and the advice we received is this will be fantastic. Please go ahead. We would, give you full support here. This will be greatly appreciated by the Uzbek government, by the economy. So it just added extra confidence for us. Yeah. So we just understood it was the perfect fit, not only financially for us, investment-wise, but also the continuous investment in Uzbekistan. Yeah. So it was just, perfect fit.
I think that your sort of that explanation and what Simon just described fits well together. It suggests that the 2030 strategy is state-led in terms of generating scale on the part of small-scale Uzbek producers, helping them modernize and move in the right direction, but that ultimately, from the standpoint of potential foreign investors or large private sector enterprises, there is this commitment to liberalizing the market so that you can make decisions based on the commercial factors. So in some ways, I think those are very consistent aspects of the strategy. I'd like to turn to Mr. Mamatkulov and ask a question that's related to what you described in your presentation, which was the move away from monoculture in agricultural production. So particularly, we're hearing a lot that the Uzbek government is encouraging cotton producers to move into fruit and vegetable production. I'm interested to know how this has impacted your business, whether or not you feel that you as a company that is trying to do exports at scale expect to have a more steady flow of inputs and products coming in so that you can actually meet the orders and the needs of large foreign buyers.
ishlab chiqaruvchilarni zakazlariga, buyurtmalariga javob berish uchun sizlarga qanday tushunma berdi?
Ahamiyat bersak, o'sha oxirgi 3 yilda aynan o'sha davlat buyurtmasi mana 2020-yildan umuman qishloq xo'jaligi sohasida davlat buyurtmasi degan so'zni o'zi.
So first we may it was for the last 3 years to get rid of this state order as a concept, and as of 20, this is no longer a practice to do this state purchase order.
Yani şu yirik yer egalarilarda kooperatsiyalarda paydo bo'lishi o'zidan, ya'ni yerga egalik huquqini.
And also, second thing is that the establishment of the clusters of land, this allows the ownership and property overall to move towards more privatized.
Oddiy misol mana bu kompaniya tizimi bo'lsa-da aytaman. Bundan 3 yil oldin masalan BMW kompaniyasi oddiy misol Rossiyaning Peterburg kompaniyasi bilan to'g'ri olmas edi.
Just to illustrate with a small 3 years, as a company was not capable, was not able to sign a direct contract with Russian Peterka group of companies.
Sababi 1 yil 12 oy mobaynida biz mahsulotlar bilan ta'minlab bera olmasdik. Birinchidan.
The first reason was that we would not be able to supply produce your.
Ikkinchidan, aynan o'sha bir nechta fermer xo'jaliklariga ishonib turib biz o'sha bevosita, ya'ni o'zimizga tegishli bo'lgan yerda kimlargadir ikkinchi shaxsga ishonib biz o'sha kafolatli eksportni ta'minlay olmasdik.
And second thing, we would not be able to ensure provide secure export volumes if we would entrust part of our purchase orders to the third parties, to the other farms.
Bugun o'z-o'zidan, ya'ni salkam 64 ming gektar yerga egalik qilyapmiz. Ya'ni o'z-o'zidan yerga o'zimiz egalik qilyapmiz. Xohlagan mahsulot turimizni ekamiz. Xohlagan kompaniya, xohlasin Rossiya, xohlasin Ukraina, xohlasin Yevropaning boshqa mamlakatlar bilan shartnoma olib turib, bevosita majburiyatlarni bajarish imkoniyatiga ega bo'lyapmiz.
And current situation is that we are able to essentially control 64,000 hectares of land, and we're capable of meeting much greater scale of supply, and we can have direct contracts with any large companies in Russia and in other markets.
Buni oddiy misol 2016-yildan boshlaydigan bo'lsak, birinchi Rossiya faqat Rossiya deganmiz. Mana etap imkoniyatlarimizga qarab o'sha Rossiya, Xitoy, Fransiya, Pokiston, Hindiston, bugungi kunda o'sha yana ham ko'plab boshqa o'sha Qatar, mana Saudiya Arabistoni, Dubai, boshqa mamlakatlarga ham o'sha eksport imkoniyatimiz ochilib, shu davlatlarga o'sha eksportni boshladik.
Besides that, I would like to mention that our export capacity has also increased. As in 2016, we would be able to export to Russia alone, and now there is a number of companies we can and do provide exports, as such China, France, India, Qatar, Dubai, and many others.
Bu shu o'rinda men bitta narsani aytmoqchimanki, bugungi kunda davlat O'zbekistonda biznesni, aynan shu частный sektorni qo'llab-quvvatlashga har taraflama ko'makchi bo'lyapti.
And I would like to emphasize one more thing, that today the state is providing full-scale support to the private business in this sector. And this is and we can witness it in our daily practice.
Shuning uchun tanib olib aytish kerak, bugungi kunda investorlar ham juda ham ko'p, mahsulotlarga xaridorlar ham juda ham ko'p.
And we would like to mention that in fact there is a greater flow of investors and greater access to markets due to these efforts to support the business.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Thank you. If I may, I'm going to ask a question of the ambassadors now, who have very graciously stayed on this call this whole time, although they have many demands on their time. I'm going to start with a question for Ambassador Rustamov. There have been two questions that touch on the importance of water and the water supply for the agricultural sector. And obviously, although Uzbekistan does not share some of the challenges of many countries, such as Middle Eastern countries, in terms of water scarcity, it is an issue. And I wonder if you could comment on the steps that the government is taking to ensure not only that water is available for irrigation, but also that there's environmentally sustainable use of the wastewater from any of the agricultural processing. But at the same time, there's another question related to this from Joanna Lillis, whom we both know, and a phenomenal journalist. And she has pointed out that the recent collapse of the Sardoba Dam in May was an instance of a major piece of water infrastructure, actually failing. And her question is whether or not, what steps the government is basically taking to give, let's say, investors in the agricultural space confidence that the underlying infrastructure, particularly around water and irrigation management, will be durable, and whether or not they should be concerned about this particular incident.
Thank you very much. So regarding on first issue, so indeed the water issue is a topical for Uzbekistan, but it's not mostly related to the water consumption. Let's say it's I would say it's an issue of water consumption per in total, in general. I mean, for one person. So we solve this issue because it's for many years the water was not used in a proper manner. So we use it like it was given. But right now we understand the let's say the value of the water, and right now the Uzbekistan government is shifting to the water effective mechanism or water effective technologies, like for example drip irrigation. So it's a big government program to implement the drip irrigation in agriculture. And of course, we are considering the other technologies of reprocessing of wastewaters and to reuse it in the agriculture sphere as well. So it's also in the consideration of government. Regarding this big infrastructure projects in water irrigation and regarding the Sardoba Dam, so it's still the investigation is going on in this process. I would not I would not comment in details in this sphere right now. But regarding these foreign investors, I don't think that there should be any concerns about coming to Uzbekistan and realizing the projects in this sphere, because this is a matter of, let's say, the rule of law, which is Uzbekistan is also creating the very transparent, very strict, very, let's say, understandable, the measures of law, and the foreign investors would operate definitely based on the law in Uzbekistan.
Thank you, Ambassador. That's very clear. Now, if I can turn to Ambassador Torlot, there was a question about kind of the trade harmonization that needs to take place. And you have been working hard, and I know that I believe towards the end of last year, Uzbekistan and the UK signed a more substantive partnership agreement. And I'm curious to know to what extent work around harmonization of trade was part of those conversations, and whether or not there are steps that might be taken to ensure that when Uzbek goods are exported to the UK or vice versa, tariffs are not going to be a major barrier. Of course, this is going to be important for the global Britain that is trying to be established post-Brexit, and certainly if the potential for the trade is there, we'd want to see that kind of harmonization. So what steps, if any, have been taken in that area? Ambassador, I believe you need to unmute yourself again. There you are.
That's right. I was better when it was quiet. It's probably a question for both of us actually, but I'm happy to try to answer it. I think first of all, as you yourself said, right at the end of October last year, we signed the UK-Uzbekistan Partnership and Cooperation Agreement, which really was a legal process for ensuring that all the protections and indeed other parts of the relationship that had existed while we were members of the European Union were allowed to continue beyond our departure. And we signed it on the 31st of October, which, as those with long memories will recall, was the day we should have been leaving the European Union. And it's pretty much a replication of the Partnership and Cooperation Agreement that Uzbekistan still has with the 27 member states of the European Union. As many of the participants in this discussion will know, Uzbekistan has for some while been negotiating an enhanced partnership and cooperation agreement with the EU, which is making, as I understand it, good progress. When we were still member states, the EU probably had got to a point where the EU and Uzbekistan had agreed 90% of the terms of an enhanced partnership and cooperation agreement. We have discussed, the British government have discussed with the Uzbek government the idea that once the terms of our full departure from the European Union are clear, it makes sense to look again at enshrining some of the language to which we'd agreed in the EU Enhanced Partnership and Cooperation Agreement in our own agreement, but also looking for areas where Uzbekistan aspired to have a different sort of relationship with us, and vice versa. And there are a number of areas where, including agriculture, where actually it might be a little bit easier to negotiate an agreement with us than it is to negotiate an agreement with the EU. But I have no idea. These are the sorts of things that will be on the table in our government-to-government conversations after the end of the year, once we have agreed the terms of the transition agreement. of the full agreement, whatever that looks like. We will be having, in the margins of the Uzbekistan British Trade and Industry Council on the 3rd and 4th of February, discussions on the business environment with the Uzbek government. I am absolutely certain that a future partnership and cooperation agreement will be part of that discussion. What's in that, who knows? There will be issues that we want on the table, largely market access issues in the sectors that are most important to us. There will be issues that the Uzbek government wants on the table, which includes access to UK markets for agricultural produce in the brave new world that we are embarking on.
Thank you, Ambassador. I mean, I suppose it's important to know that it's on the agenda, and certainly this is something that I believe will be taken up also during the next meeting of the Uzbek British Trade and Industry Council, which should take place in February of next year.
3rd and 4th of February.
Exactly.
We've both given it a plug now.
If I can, we have just a few more minutes, and I have basically 2 or 3 more questions I want to cover. I wonder if, Wais, if there's anything you'd like to add to the ambassador's comments, because you mentioned in your presentation that these harmonization issues are important, also particularly ensuring that whatever standards Uzbekistan places for its sector are consistent with things like WTO accession, which is going to be important if the country is going to reach 20 billion in exports of agricultural goods. How do you see that moving forward as someone from looking at this from a private sector perspective? How far are we from having the right playing field for exports to grow considerably?
Thanks very much, Asfan, again, and just echoing the sound of Ambassador as well. I personally see a lot of potential for the Uzbek products for the UK market. I think what is very important is the accession to WTO, but apart from that, the cooperation between the countries who are part of WTO, like Afghanistan, you have Pakistan, which is they're already part of that, and that actually eases the work in terms of providing the logistic route of those products to UK market, and apparently the products from Uzbekistan, it could be widely available to UK market as well, in a sense.
Thank you, Wais. So, obviously that's something that as a business community, we'll have to continue sort of pushing for to make sure that the regulations, or as what Igor, referred to in some ways as even the local bureaucracy, is conducive to the trade growing. So, absolutely. As a couple final questions, I'm going to ask Husan very briefly, just to comment on something that a few of the attendees have asked about, which is training. And Simon mentioned this is an area where basically UK could play an important role, but certainly European companies. You described a large range of different refrigeration equipment, food processing equipment, freezing equipment that you have recently installed, and also certifications that your company has received. How did you successfully install that equipment and learn to operate it? I mean, what was the relationship? How did GDF bring the expertise and train your factory managers so they knew how to make sure that this equipment was working and didn't have too much downtime? If you could talk about that briefly, and then I'll turn a final question to Simon before we wrap up the conversation.
Okay, I should note that all these equipments has been installed years before, about at least 2 years before. The last one, let's say, some of our shock freezing lines has been built in Termes, has been installed in 2017. So I should say all these companies who are installing in Uzbekistan or bringing or importing some equipments to Uzbekistan, they are bringing their own specialists who can teach our specialists, our engineers, our specialists on monitoring all these equipments. They are teaching by themselves, at least taking 1 month or 2 months until they explain and how to use this equipment, all these technical issues they explain, and they if I understood that one, they will teach everything by themselves.
And did you get outside advice on which equipment you should buy in order to create the right basically production facilities?
Yeah, we made short researches. What kind of equipments will be more preferable to use in terms of energy saving and in terms of quality. We made a lot of research before buying these equipments. And most of them, for example, Octafrost is one of the top branded companies who giving the most quality on their equipment. So that's why we choose them. And regarding, for example, a laser sorter equipment like Tomra, also it's a number. It is the quality of this equipment is one of the highest in European markets. Also, what we are targeting is to get the markets of Europe, the European buyers and European clients. They prefer the equipment should be made in Europe. That's why we preferably imported that equipment from European companies mostly.
Excellent, thank you. It has worked. The mark of quality has worked because one of the attendees described the facilities as very impressive in the question that they asked. So thank you. Simon, I'll turn to you for the last question and some final comments, if you will. The last question is sort of one that we haven't really touched on, but I think it's a good one that has been raised by one of the participants, is that in your presentation, you highlighted that animal feed is actually one of the areas where there has been relatively little investment. And we've talked a lot about basically fruit and vegetable production, but we have not talked a lot about livestock, whether for dairy purposes or for meat production, poultry, beef, and so forth. I wondered if maybe you could comment on that a little bit, maybe if you saw anything relevant to that, where it is in the overall 2030 strategy. And then I leave it to you to make a few final remarks on anything that you consider to be important takeaways from this conversation before we close.
Thank you. In terms of the meat and meat processing, I think that's at an early stage in Uzbekistan. And I think one of the issues that investors are focusing on is, first of all, importing cattle to breed, cattle who are being imported from Europe in particular, and actually starting to develop cattle breeding programs to increase the amount of beef and lamb, and obviously increase poultry facilities, so that Uzbekistan reduces the amounts of imports of these products coming from Kazakhstan, Russia, and so forth. I think in terms of final comment, one of the things which I would like to highlight is Uzbekistan has been very, very successful in creating a global tourism brand. Uzbekistan has made tremendous inroads in increasing its profile as a tourist destination, and I think we can transfer that experience to creating a global Uzbekistan food brand and sort of daughter brands below that, because Uzbekistan has many distinct regions with many distinct agricultural products. And I think there's a tremendous upside for a global Uzbekistan food brand and sub-brands below that, particularly in terms of different types of fruit and vegetables, which would be a very exciting proposition for consumers across the world. And I think British firms can bring a tremendous amount of expertise in that area in terms of brand building and brand development. And that's a key aspect of Uzbekistan's 2030 strategy. Obviously, Uzbekistan is starting from a relatively low base in terms of export potential. But I think there's such a good news story about, the history, the craftsmanship of Uzbek food products, that if we can get the marketing pitch right and build an Uzbekistan food brand, I think Uzbekistan is absolutely going to deliver on its target of 20 billion in exports by 2030.
Thank you, Simon. I hadn't thought of the tourism connection, but it makes perfect sense. And, in many ways, I think the fact that the country is such a fertile land that can grow all of these fruits is part of its natural beauty. It's part of the sort of overall appeal.
Yeah.
And you're right that connecting the two things, the sort of sense of taste with the sense of place, that, as the Italians or French would say, the terroir, is going to be very important. So we've gone over a little bit to allow us to try and answer some of these questions. I think we've answered around 16 in total so far that had been placed by the participants. I want to thank all of the speakers for taking the time to join us. I mean, this was a really, hopefully this was clear, but a very impressive panel of individuals who are actively making this sector. And both from the foreign side and the Uzbek side. I'll reiterate that we will distribute the presentations tomorrow. Those presentations that I have permission to share with you, in many cases, there will also be longer presentations with more detail about the companies such as BMB and GDF. I remain available if there's anything I can help with. I'd also be happy to make introductions between some of the participants and the speakers. So please feel free to email me. The emails that you will have received about the event, that is the email address that you can reach me, yar@eurasianinvestor.com. And then finally, I'd say that we're going to be continuing this webinar series. We started with a webinar on the economy and COVID-19 in Uzbekistan. We have now done agribusiness. We are working on webinars on mining, particularly with a focus for British businesses, and also fintech in Central Asia, which should be announced in the coming weeks. And we hope that some of those programs will also be of interest to you. So from my side, thank you all for participating, for joining us today. And we will continue to be in touch as we keep the dialogue going about this exciting economy. Thank you very much, and have a good day. Bye-bye.